Jeez, I'm trying to see if it even comes up. Oh, there we go. All right. Jeez, I'm trying to see. Oh, we good. What's good with you, man? Brother Moses, man. I see the camera now, so it is up here. I got a great piece of information that I want to share today. One major topic, probably about 60 minutes, so rock with me. Got a little music going in the background to keep myself motivated. As you see here on the screen, there are a couple of iconic images that are going to be resounding as a theme throughout this conversation. So implicit bias, the role of those stereotypes in cultivating discrimination, that whole attitude, right? It's implicit bias. It starts on the mind and then it has social, political, and economic ramifications. So I'm going to talk about it. I do want to go into the definition of what implicit bias is a little bit, but then I also want to talk about some of the broader context. So health inequalities that persist, due to a number of factors, really. Number one would be, individual decision making. Probably half of the story there is going to be what you decide to do, maybe even more than half. To some people, it's probably a lot more than half. The health inequalities that persist are due to more than 50% is just your individual decision making. So it's an internal thing. It's on you. Number two, though, would be those external or environmental factors that are outside of that individual's control, of which others do play a significant role in the causing of said harms, right? The health inequality that persists is due, I would say it's about 50%, the environment, external, somebody else had something else to do with it. And oftentimes, here's what I took my note on when it comes to those harms, is that it was intentional, absolutely. It was very strategic. And then just because I have a bit of a pessimistic mindset, I'll tell you that it was egregious, but only to a small extent will you find it where it was the person, an individual who had an influence that caused a harm in someone else's life, and they did so unknowingly. And then lastly, I'll let you know that it is often because of the nature of capitalism on being that small percentage of people who just didn't know. They were just playing a part. They were a worker. Their harms was not directly intentional, strategic, or even egregious towards you. It's just somebody else, another laborer in the market, another household representative. That one and their small minority, they are just a byproduct of business from that lens of profit maximization. All right. So resounding throughout this conversation, I do have a couple of screen. For one, on your left, looks like that is Young M.A. came out, what is it, LGBTQ rapper, notorious for bars, dropping bars. And why is she the target, or why are lesbians the target, and all of that? That is one of those implicit biases. That's that 50% decision making as somebody comes to understand who they are and what they represent and what they embody here as labor and as a representative of their household. And she came with a brand. And the brand that she came with was deeply rooted in some of the major issues that we'll have conversations about in perpetuity, which is sexual selection. If you ask Obsidian, another content creator, who I do name drop in source as a site, for sometimes he does deliver great information. If you ask Obsidian, he has a reference to Charles Darwin's, not just that natural selection, but also sexual selection. That conversation will continue. And then if you look on the right, another strong brand dominating the young hip hop artists. This song, Guatemala, was one of my favorites. I absolutely have like at least 10 favorite songs from this young group. They're not millennials, they're younger than millennials. They are the impressionables, if you ask me. And that's Sway Lee right there. Slim Jim, then my guys right there. I rock with them guys. And so, yeah, there'll be a lot of screen sharing in this. I did want to lay the premise. This is what I'll be talking about. I said about 60 minutes, but I may scale it back. I don't know. I'm feeling pretty good. I got my music in the background. I think my mic is finally rocking. Let me give a quick shout out to those who have joined us during the live stream, but be sure to like and subscribe. This content may be not just for you, but for someone else. See, right? I'm going to give it to you from the lens that I can give it to you from, which is my Black-centered lens. But the actual source of the information is the Harvards and the Yales and the Princetons. They are the ones who are creating this survey. Now, similarly to what my major underlying premise is, as a pro-Black man, would be the health inequalities that persist and how do we address them. That 50%, when I'm thinking about 50%, let's break down that number of your own personal decisions. That 50%, it is propped up by a lot of the similar stereotypes or the coincidental behaviors of others, right? So the syphilis study, and how does that impact the way that you think? Well, maybe you don't want to participate in a study just due to what you heard about that, right? So that legacy of being deterred, your vaccination shots and how science has evolved with bacteria and the curing of smallpox or whatever it might be, and the preventing of influenzas and bat flus and shit like China has. Whatever those healthcare inequalities might be, are they linked to the food that you eat? Are they linked to your environment, but yet it's what you are still eating? I don't know, let's just rock with it. Those studies are available, and oftentimes it is the African Americans who are not represented. What happens if you're not on those studies? Then that's the Harvards and the Princetons and the Yales, and they're passing out their curriculums to the other schools when it comes to those STEM and medical, and they're going to the think tanks for medical and pharmaceutical, but they don't know what to do with your Black body. Their scientists can only experiment on a dead carcass or an alcoholic, but they don't know what nutritious value you actually need. Being a hybrid, and what would I call them? A sub-equatorial people. Your lineage is below the equator, but your diet today is predominantly above the creator, above the equator. And they don't know what to do with you. These sicknesses that they have, that as a part of their society, you are now exposed to in just interacting with their external environment that they've created. That sickness that not only hits you physically, but that mental sickness, and how your mind has to try to fight against sickness. How your cells are reacting and responding to the external, them. And it's been hundreds of years without study, accurate study from even your brilliant minds, our brilliant minds, my brilliant mind is often just in the form of its labor. And so implicit biases and how they cultivate stereotypes, how do they cultivate it? Let's move forward. Keep as a resounding theme this young brother on the right, which is the impressionable, and then the young MA. And then we'll jump into the next piece of content that we have, which was, this is still just a premise. I said about 60 minutes, so rock with me, salute. And so you have these conversations from a lens of male supremacy being a dominant way of thinking and that mind, and what does the mind actually do? What chemicals does it create when it is I don't know, telling the mouth to say such stupid ass shit that they be saying sometimes? This misogynistic worldview. SPLC Center wanted to identify African American men who were on that fringe of society. They were looking at them as incels and MGTOW, and as well as the save yourself black man type of ideologies, which they call rooted in male supremacy. Here's what they had to say. Male supremacy was fundamental to the foundation of the racist alt-right, and in many ways it served as its gateway drug. There's a lot to unpack right there, that alt-right and this Brexit, this Blacksit, this whatever it is, this, the Republican Party, or this idea that we weren't always Republicans even before some gateway of an alt-right ideology was reintroduced. I digress. It is characterized by angry rants blaming feminism for the decline of Western civilization and deriding feminists as social justice warriors. Personalities like alt-right facilitator, blank, blank, conspiracy theorist, blank, blank, pickup artist, blank, blank. Personalities, conspiracy theorists, and pickup artists. Why does that sound familiar? Whose sector is that? Who is replicating that sector as black media and giving their audience members and their subscribers the biggest platform? Well, that would be my homeboy, Negro Manosphere, where the pickup artist can get even bigger than his channel, but they can pick up on angry, ranting, chat box, pseudo alt-right male supremacists, I guess. I'll keep going. And Return of Kings, an alt-right.com writer, blank, blank, also constantly straddle the line between more formal alt-right circles and the male supremacist world. So they are essentially trying to lump in a group of African Americans with those they consider alt-right. And they are still propagating this feminist movement as not a good or a bad, but saying that those men in those alt-right would call it a bad. That equal rights for women is something that has to be countered by the rights of men, as if men didn't already have rights. Bash a Violent Bitch Month. They try to back out of it by saying, oh, this is just satire. But what they're really saying there is that I am just a byproduct of capitalism, of business profit maximization. That's what they say. And when I say they again, I would be referring to the peoples from that Black Manosphere. All right. So enough. They're trying to make them one of those hate groups, put them on a watch list and all of that extra other curricular shit. To me, it's always just going to be a distraction from the real research and strategic initiatives that have to happen in order for us to continue to see excellent strides and gains in any of these areas. So I'm going to name drop these real quick, and then I'm going to move straight the hell forward. So you have 2017 State of Science, Implicit Bias Review, 2 lenses, 1 goal. Race matters, and so does gender. Implicit bias in school discipline, opportunity communities, challenging race and risk, implicit bias in housing, the Food Opportunity Research Collaborative. You'll hear me talk about that a lot when I talk about the food oases, or what happens when your community no longer has Black farmers outside of it. Where will your churches get their fresh produce? Will you only see the corn man and not see African American fish man in your neighborhoods? I Am My Brother's Keeper, 2016 Champion of Children Report, Voices of Latino Boys. They snuck that one in there, but I'll mention it anyway. Mid-Ohio Food Bank Client Centricity Study, Franklin County Senior Opportunity, a framework for investment, diversity data for kids, Beast, Public Health, HEAT, which is the Health Equity Action Transformation, the effects of lead poisoning, shout out to Flint, Michigan, the Greater Columbus Infant Mortality Final Report. So much more that can be discussed when we break down and define implicit bias and how it cultivates stereotypes that lead to discrimination or that result in discrimination. So let's define implicit bias using the Kirwana Institute. It's out of Ohio. Also known as implicit social cognition, implicit bias refers to the attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, our actions, and decisions in an unconscious manner. These biases, which encompass both favorable and unfavorable assessments, are activated involuntarily and without an individual's awareness or intentional control. Residing deep in the subconscious, these biases are different from known biases that individuals may choose to conceal for the purposes of social and political correctness. Rather, implicit biases are not accessible through introspection. The implicit associations we harbor in our subconscious cause us to have feelings and attitudes about other people based on characteristics such as race, ethnicity, age, and appearance. These associations develop over the course of a lifetime, beginning at a very early age and through exposure to direct and indirect messaging media. In addition to early life experiences, the media and news programming are often cited origins of implicit associations. A few characteristics: they are pervasive. Everyone possesses them, even people with avowed commitments to impartiality, such as judges. Implicit and explicit biases are related but distinct mental constructs. They are not mutually exclusive and may even reinforce each other. The implicit associations we hold do not necessarily align with our declared beliefs or even reflect stances we would explicitly endorse. We generally tend to hold implicit biases that favor our own in-group, though research has shown that we can still hold implicit biases against our own in-group. Woo! Fire. Implicit biases are malleable. Our brains are incredibly complex, and the implicit associations that we have formed can be gradually unlearned through a variety of de-biasing techniques. And let's move forward, because the implicit association test has a number of categories, a number of tests. This is an actual study to which we need more participants. There are upwards of 1 to 2 million people who have already participated. But if we break down those numbers to see what African Americans have experienced, then there will not be the progression of said studies inside the premier predominantly white institutions. And if there's not the studies or the information, if we're not giving them the information, or they don't have access to the actual information, then what are they passing into the rest of the institutions of academia? What messages are they sending to the rest of academia if they don't even have a Black perspective chimed in on any of their studies? Not health related, not social related, not economic related, and definitely not represented in politics. Only the tokens, those who can somehow turn off their in-group and turn on their biases that favor those who are not a part of their in-group. Their strength, or the degree to which they relate to an in-group, and the degree to which they have taken that in-group and expounded it to include minorities. Hey, what's up? Go ahead, you can walk through. My camera is pretty focused.
It's focused so they can see all the floor.
They have tests from gender science to skin tone for that same colorism argument. Take the test yourself. Look at what the numbers are representative of those 1 to 2 million samples. That's big, right? That is a good percentage, if you ask me. Look at some of the other tests, even some of the population tests or income tests, or even the political tests that they do. They'll call 1,000 people and make that sample representative of the whole. This one at least has 1 million. It's not as big as the census numbers, but it is building. And it still is underrepresented from our perspective. That'd be one perspective. And so I would challenge those who are a part of that network or the evolving networks here in the Black YouTube space to take a couple of these yourselves, contribute, make your information or your way of thinking known. What it is, it's a speed test. It's association, meaning how long does it take to connect this with this? And it's looking at how many times you got it wrong, but mostly how many times you got it right. And when you got it right, it's really measuring how long it took you to get it right. And as we go through some of these, you'll see that they are in severe need of our input. But they have them on skin tone. If you specialize in the colorist conversation and have not taken the Harvard implicit bias test for skin tone to see where you actually land, then your information is probably a little bit less credible to me. If you talk about conditions of race, you know, your opinion matters. I would always sit there and listen, but to cite you as a source, I don't know. I would have to severely disagree with you before I even mentioned your name. But race matters, race conversations in like the schools of the Cornell Wests, the Eddie S. Glaude Jr., Democracy in Black. I want him to take that test to see where he lands. To what degree does he hold Black? They have him about disabilities. Let me read that one. This IAT, implicit association test, requires the ability to recognize symbols representing abled and disabled individuals. Kind of interesting. Not something that I would take in my first couple of tests, but interesting. Arab Muslim. Distinguish names that are likely to belong to Arab Muslims versus people of other nationalities or religions. That one's damn near informative. I don't fucking know. Weapons. This IAT requires the ability to recognize white and Black faces and images of weapons or harmless objects. That one sounds interesting, especially for those who want to work in the police field. What are your biases when it comes to just basic weapons in Black and white faces? I think if I took that one, I would have a easier time putting harmful weapons or associating harmful weapons with white people than I would with Black. I think non-pro-Black or non-Black loving people would have a easier time. If they don't love Blackness, it would be faster for them to see Black faces and harmless objects and weapons in the same light. It would be easier for them and faster for them to see a Black face and a weapon and say, ooh, ooh, bad, 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 bad. And it would be harder for them to see that same weapon. So let's say an image of a Black face, and then the one on the right that is the image of the sawed-off shotgun or whatever it is. They would have an easier. I'm gonna take that one right now. That's the one we gonna do right there. Ding, 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 ding. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. You thought it was gonna be about race. You thought it was gonna be about colorism. It could have been about weight or appearance. But let's do this one live. Next, you will use the E and the I computer keys to categorize items into groups as fast as you can. These are 4 groups and the items that belong to each. You have your harmless objects, you have your weapons, you have Black Americans. Look at this. These are the Black Americans. And then you have white Americans. Look at this. See, this is where I always start getting beat up on. I get beat up on these. Especially like this one. I can't even, this one right here. Can't do it, bro. There are 7 parts. The instructions change for each part, so pay attention. Put my left finger on the E. That is going to belong to the category of white Americans. Put my right finger on the I. That's going to belong to the category of Black Americans. Items will appear one at a time. If I make a mistake, a red X will appear. I can press the other key to continue. Go as fast as I can while being as accurate as I can. White Americans on my left, Black Americans on my right. white, supposedly black. This is right in line with your colorism, only from the lens of the images that they have selected to use. Put a left finger on the E for the items that belong to category harmless objects. Put a right finger on the I if that is a weapon. Same thing, if I get it wrong, I will get an X. Harmless, harmless, weapons. These are weapons if you ask me, but I can't do it. That cell phone is a weapon. Use the E for white Americans and for harmless. See, this is where the test gets a bit more defining of how it cultivates stereotypes and discrimination that result in discrimination. See, now you're asking me, I'll read it out loud. Use the E for white Americans and for harmless objects. So my brain has to be able to process both white Americans and harmless objects. Use the I key for black Americans and for weapons. So you're telling me to separate between whites and blacks, as well as you're telling me to associate a harmless object with white, and you're telling me with this test to associate a weapon with black. And how hard is it for my brain to do so? How long does it take for my mind to associate a harmless object with a white American at the same time? How long does it take for my brain to process a black American face or an image? They've shown me the images. I see them. I know which ones they consider to be black Americans based off of their colorism argument. And I also know which weapons they want me to consider to be harmless weapons. I mean, which weapons they want me to consider as weapons. So I know those, but now it's time to actually test where my association or my biases start to get deep. I know that's white and supposedly harmless. That camera is going to continue to get me, because to me, a camera is definitely a weapon. To me, that tape cassette player is definitely a weapon. That ice cream, well, it's a milk product, probably from a cow and its DNA. All right, so we got by it without any errors. This is the same as the previous part. Use the E for white Americans and for harmless objects. Use the I for black Americans and for weapons. Go as fast as you can while being accurate. White, harmless, black, weapon. See what your brain has to do? A weapon is black. Cell phone. A grenade with the pin in it is harmless. That dude, a Coca-Cola can that used to have the crack in it, all of that sugar, well, if you ask me, it's probably a weapon. That cannon without a round in it is harmless. An axe on the shelf is an axe on the shelf. That is a weapon. I knew I would get it wrong eventually because I just tend to disagree. Now, one of the things that I actually like about this is the fact that it deals with both the left and the right brain simultaneously. Your mind has to continue to challenge itself on speed and accuracy on how you associate these things. And you're going to sit there and fight against it. Watch out now. These labels have changed position. Use the left finger on the E for black. So now, from the left to the right, now my left eye is more dominant. And so I probably can do a little bit faster black Americans on my left side and then on the right. So my creative versus my intelligence fighting itself. Yep, that's absolutely easier. There is nothing creative about it. That is absolutely easier. Uh-oh. Sorry, little lady. You're not one of us. All right, so blacks with harmless objects. That's probably going to be easier for me. Again, when I say easier, I'm meaning in the amount of time it takes for my brain to process this shit. Blacks is harmless, whites is weapons. I know I'm biased to the motherfucker. Get your ass over there where the real harms are. Over there, over there, over there. All right, same as the previous one. Blacks with the harmless objects on the left, white Americans with their weapons on the right. Now, again, over 1 million people have already taken this. You don't know who that million may be. So the last part will be from my LinkedIn of this. You are biased just as the program. Black dagger, white harmless. What up, Jeremy? Man, I ain't seen you in a minute. That is a pre-excuse for a computer glitch or a need for a program upgrade. Absolutely. So Jeremy Awakening, you dropped that's what I said at the beginning. You probably joined a little bit late, but because they don't have it, they think that those images that they put on there are Black American. Some others might disagree. They had someone on there that looked predominantly, I'll show you when I get there. Why that is a weapon. That is a weapon. I don't know how they think that cell phone is harmless. I guess they wanted to be less obvious, like a wallet. You don't consider economics a weapon? What? Where they do that at? That camera, how not? Of course, they wanted to be dramatic with a big ass cannon, an old ass cannon. And look at this old ass axe. What the fuck is that about? Yeah, I almost double tapped that one. And then that grenade. All right, so they're going to ask a little basic information and then they should have the results. Oh. Let me do this real quick. Cause I'm a 80s baby, catch a lot of heat. What is my race? Thanks for asking. What is my ethnicity? See, that's the big one. Now that they're taking this term ethnicity itself and making it Hispanic or not Hispanic. Ain't that crazy? Ain't it crazy? When they used to have the race, ethnicity, and nationality conversation, now ethnicity itself, look, whatever applications or things that you might go towards, whatever it might be, this whole ethnicity as a identifier. So as an identity, when they're asking about how do you identify ethnically, now it's Hispanic or non-Hispanic. That is some new shit. I've done about 3 to 5 of these bad boys. What is my political identity? I don't fucking know. I'm not neutral. I'm not any of these. Let's say strongly liberal. Everybody do your own motherfucking thing. If that even what that means. What is your religious affiliation? I don't fucking know. Christian, Catholic, or Orthodox. What the fuck does that mean? Yeah, let's go with this one. Sounds like protest is in that motherfucker. Yeah, let's do protest. I don't fucking know. These people are weird. What the fuck does that got to do with anything? How religious do I consider myself to be? I don't have any relics. I wouldn't be able to have that conversation with a white person, especially somebody at Harvard. None of your goddamn business. business. Oh no, they did have it. All right, how much do I associate the following objects with Black Americans and white Americans? Weapons. Weapons strongly with white Americans. Every household, and what did they say? Like 99% of the weapons produced that stay here in America, like the guns and all of that shit, are in the white households. And I don't know how people may break it down ethnically, but yeah, that's some white shit right there. Yes, Black people hunt. Yes, Black people are gun owners and all of that shit. You motherfuckers ain't shit when it comes. I've arsenals. How much do we associate the following objects with Black Americans and white Americans? Harmless objects. And again, you're going to have to tell me again what you consider to be harmless. The Coca-Cola was detrimental. All of that sugar. Health inequalities. How warm or cold do you feel towards Black? I'm extremely warm. Thanks for asking. How warm or cold do you feel towards? I'm extremely, I don't give a fuck. Do your thing. During the IAT you just completed, your responses suggest a moderate automatic association for harmless objects with Black Americans and weapons with white. Of course and so now they asked me, what do I think it was? Oh, here's the responses. There you go. So here's the result of what I just did, of the test that I just took with you all. It says during the IAT or implicit association test you just completed, your responses suggested a moderate automatic association, so automatic, for harmless objects with Black Americans. Yeah, we're not the ones walking around with these grenade launchers and shit. We're not the ones trying to create nukes. The Star program, whatever it is supposed to give us 10G satellite coverage. We should have the data plan of it's $1.99, but the data should be through the roof. That is Black innovation. If you look at the Black military bases, the Fort Blisses and such, and their expansion from being an air considering army force to being one that puts satellites in the sky. Then you have the Weather Channel from one of the black men of, God damn it, whatever his fucking name is, the Weather Channel, doing the whole civil rights shit. And then you have so satellites for the human use, for expanding communication, for making life and the quality of life here in America more palatable. Yes, there's disaster preparedness implications with satellites and all of that shit that expands our prevention and all of those other measures. But when Black people get in those positions of dominance, they're not the ones using these weapons for the Space Force that the white folks would want. The white folks would want those battle axes to shoot out of a satellite and just start chopping people in half. When they see drones, they want a drone to be able to fire a weapon and destroy the contents of someone's mind, like literally to kill people. That's what I think. And so it says an association for harmless objects with Black Americans and weapons with white Americans, of course. So they absolutely confirmed exactly what I already know. See, now what some people do, they go into the world making statements and things or having conversations looking to confirm their own biases. So rather than confirmation bias, which is different than implicit bias, not confirmation where you only go in spaces where people say the same. No, that's what I do intentionally when I'm consuming Black media. I go to Black YouTube to consume Black media for confirmation bias, to finally be with people who are not afraid or not ashamed to say this shit, because I work in corporate America in finance, and there are a lot of token Blacks who will not say the shit that I say. So a majority, when you break your lifetime, your 24 hours a day into percentages, the majority of when I am awake and having conversations, even with Black people, that's where I work, 8 hours a day. And even having the conversations with the people who work there alongside of me, they are not there with the same type of talking points or attitude that I have. They have an affinity that would not be representative in any of these tests. If they took these tests, I believe that many of them are on the opposite spectrum. They don't have an automatic association with harmless objects for Blacks. Now, don't get that twisted. I said the Fort Bliss, from the Buffalo Soldiers to going all the way down into Texas, coming out of the South, which is the representation of Black movement and Black migration from its position of slavery in 1862 to 1863, the establishment of those military bases, as well as when we did get the land grants for our colleges through the South, all the way to Texas is where they finally ended up, those Black men. So it's not a harmless Black man. But how do you associate weapons and harmless objects? Well, that's going to be different. That is going to be different. And again, off of the symbolism that they used when they defined what a harmless object was. Them and I will disagree that a cell phone is harmless. Why? Because I know that as a people, as Black folks, the oral tradition was one of the most dominant forces that we had. Our ability to communicate, media, the crisis, our journals, our newspapers, Ebony and Jet magazines, and Black YouTube, our media, our voices, our singing. It's a rich form of our weapon versus a harmless object. What, are you going to protest? You're going to march? You're going to we shall overcome him to death and kumbaya, my lordum, and you're going to pray him into submission? All of that cultural victory that you're looking towards. Well, on the other end, you would have Black men to be like white Americans that I associate with. Weapons, that cannon. Do you want more Black men pushing the cannon? Do you want more Black men pushing the battle axe? Do you want more Black men pushing that sword? Do you want more Black men with that small Dillinger pistol or you know, that little two-shotter? Is that what you want, more Black men? You want that more radical nigga? You want that nigga right there, huh? Nah, my association with Blacks has been this ongoing struggle to develop anti-prohibition against our ownership of agricultural land. The ability for a Black American to say, this is my land and this is my homestead and this is the value that I'm going to contribute to the world through the cultivation of crops, not the cultivation of stereotypes that result in discrimination. And yet, because these weapons are associated with white Americans, I'm pretty sure once we get down, they'll tell us that many white Americans and the folks who had taken this test also associate automatically weapons with white Americans. That's probably going to be the majority. Now, there is a racial discriminatory, but that's a different implicit association test. Those who fear Black people and thus associate weapons with Black people. Those who fear Black people and thus associate weapons with Black people. Yes, there are those active racists that are out there. They're ignorant as hell. Let's give a little bit more of what the results look like. We've been here for about 43 minutes. I said about 60 minutes, maybe a little bit shorter than that, but appreciate those who are rocking with us. Again, the implicit bias, the role of stereotypes in cultivating, or the role of, what is it, our biases and how our biases cultivate those stereotypes, what we think about other groups. Started off breaking it down by saying, look, 50% of what happens is probably going to be your own personal decision making, but there is a thing as external and environmental impact or influence. There are literally other people out there making decisions that you don't even know about. So while we might deal with what our own conscience is telling us to do, there are other people whose conscience is telling them to do shit deliberately to disadvantage you and your people, your family, your household, or if you're a part of the Black collective, pro-Black, and you rock with Brother Moses, your in-group, our in-group, my in-group, 3 levels of pronouns or ownership. Let's get to some more results. The result is described as automatic association if you are faster responding when white Americans and weapons are assigned the same response key. So when I had to press the E, I had to use white Americans and weapons on the same one. How long did it take me to do that when it was weapons? And was that faster than when I was trying to associate Black Americans with weapons? The answer is yes. You show me a grenade and you show me a white person and you tell me to hit that button, it's going to be faster. You show me a cannon and you show me a white face, I'm going to be able to press that button. Now, we might disagree on whiteness and how those groups break down and if they're the same in group. Do I lump an Italian in with a German and a Dutch or a regular ass Anglo-Saxon or a fucking Irishman? Do I need to see the gentleman or the Irishman to know that? No, motherfucker, I don't lump them all in. That's what somebody else would do. I think they have their own distinct in groups, but that they benefit from a bigger group that's called whiteness in America. And that they equivocate when they move from their Irish American into white American. Like racial ambiguity. They benefit from it, but it's an equivocation. You can't call me black and say I'm 40 million, but then say white is 300 something million. No, what is Irish American? What is Italian American? And then start making your comparisons on median household income and all of those other areas. Miss me with that bullshit, just like with weapons. Some of the motherfuckers is docile as fuck. Mormon America. They gonna ask me about my religion. Mormon American. Christian American. They taking these big ass groups that provide cover and ambiguity to themselves so that they are in themselves lost inside of the bigger group. No, you are a representative of your household, but whether you like it or not, you're also a part of an in group. And how you process information, such as, am I afraid and why am I actually afraid? That's going to be based off of your biases. And that's why I think this is one of the most important studies that are available for folks to participate in. It's put out by Harvard and whatever that word is, like cooperation, whatever word, collaboration with like Yale and Princeton. So this is their top institutions, and they use those folks who get those degrees to inform Wall Street. They use those folks as their think tanks. They use those folks to inform academia. And that's how curriculum for 20, 30, 40, 50 years is established. That's how the certain principles and that's what runs through that Protestant church, I guess, or that Catholic church, is their ability to have a Princeton or a Yale or a Harvard provide them with their talking points based off of these type of studies. And they don't have the representation from a nigga to even know what a nigga really feels, even about the pictures that they selected for blackness. Those symbols. So they got a couple of more questions that they want me to go into. All that is all good. What brought me to the website? This is internet search to a related topic. I absolutely enjoy it. It didn't inform shit. I already knew that. To what extent am I skeptical? Extremely, because of the symbolism that you use. You don't think a cell phone or media is a form of a weapon. You got to be stupid. This can't be Harvard, and whoever the fuck at Harvard that decided that a cell phone wasn't a weapon is the stupidest motherfucker that probably exists. A cell phone is a weapon. They got a movie, one of them independent movies, talking about that group of Indians who make those phone calls, like spam phone calls and shit, and can hit you economically, clear out your bank account. My Cash App doesn't work today because somebody was able to use their cell phone as a weapon. I've heard civil rights leaders or the students of those civil rights leaders say, if I had access to the social media that you all have today, whoa, that's what they say. They don't think that communication is a weapon. They are dismissing outright the ability to retain cultural nuances, taboos, norms, thought patterns from thousands of years ago. They are dismissing that as a weapon, even as a defense to protect your mind against the invading influence of other civilizations. How do you protect your mind and the people who are in your in-group from being more influenced by the religions and the food and the awe and glory of other civilizations? How do you protect your in-group from being more influenced by the other groups than your own group? How do you do that if not through communication? You're out of your fucking mind. I see. This is the test I see this test is probably used to determine what the propaganda machine will push even harder. So understand the Harvards and the Yales and the Princeton, look at their graduation rate, but not just there. Look at what rate when they graduate are unemployed. Look at what their employment opportunities are once they graduate. I hate that fucking word. When they graduate, where do they go and what do they do? And where do they have the influence? Now, I graduated from an HBCU, top HBCU, and my access to those spaces was restricted and very limited. We have a network that allowed, and the networks of, what are they? The fraternities and sororities that have established themselves in economic and political and social spaces to be able to empower HBCU graduates. But think about the alumni network of the Princetons and the Harvards and the Yales and ask yourself, where are their students going when you say it's probably going to be used to determine the propaganda machine? I see that you're still doubting and you're still skeptical. So you're going to be a believer, Jeremy. When you actually awaken, you're going to say, Moses, I thank you. Thank you, Brother Moses. You actually are providing some real content. So I'm going to submit those. Let's see. It tells you how it works, which I've kind of explained. Right now, there's just not enough research. Packaged diversity training, so they're saying the same thing. Generally, do not use evidence-based methods of reducing implicit biases. We're saying you don't have your diversity even has been used to be inclusive of so many other people. So let's look at some of the other people's results. Notably, more than 55% of the people included in this graph report having no difference in their associations. So they don't think black people or white. They say, I don't do it. So the majority of people don't think that they have a bias. However, 1 out of 4 people have a strong automatic association with Black Americans with weapons. And they think white Americans are with harmless objects. It's easier for them to associate white Americans, 1 out of 4. And I told you millions have taken this test. The moderate association with Black Americans with weapons and white Americans is harmless. 30%, a third, think that Black Americans are the ones with the weapons, are weapons. When they see blacks and weapons, they're faster when it comes to that shit. Slightly automatic with blacks and weapons is 20%, 19% rather. So about 1 out of 5. 18% were actually right there in the middle, but it was a majority who thought there was no preference. Only 6% is slight when it comes to Black Americans and harmless objects, or their rate to which they associate Black Americans with harm. Only 3% is moderate, and only 1% have a strong automatic association of white Americans with weapons and Black Americans with harmless objects. Preach, Brother Moses. I am in a 1% group that does not see blackness as the weapon in America, but that can rightly associate it based off of terrorism and lynching and the killing of other civilizations, whiteness with a weapon, and blackness as we weren't the ones doing that shit. Fuck you. All the aggressive behaviors that you think can be demonstrated, the millions that were killed in Iraq off that invasion, the millions that were killed, but you don't associate that with whiteness. You miss it as an institution. You look at the soldiers and say, well, our military is diverse, but you don't see that it is white power or economics or white politics. You don't even see it as white hate when we send the rockets. You don't see it as white hate when we send the men with swords. You don't see it as white hate when they burn down Black Wall Street. You don't see it that way. You see black people as the weapons. Why? Because media and programming has fucked you up. That's why. And there is no way that out of the millions of people who have taken this Harvard test that they find that black people are the enemy. No way. None. But less than 10% total see black as the harmless object. Less than 10, and this is what will be used to propagate going into our future. 90% of the others see black as some form of a weapon. They are quicker to associate it with blackness. I am a weapon. If they saw me, then they would know it, but they would have to understand that that cell phone belongs on the other end. Need I say more? But I digress. So back to business as usual. We do have some LinkedIn posts that I would love to share because somebody did a hell of a thing yesterday. It was looking at that colorism test from black women as being the least desirable all the way to the white woman who was the most desirable. And from his perspective, that was by black men. Now, unfortunately, that clown ass nigga was sitting there looking at Instagram photos rather than making it something of an equivalent talking point. So I'll show you here just a few ways to which you can step your life up. Number one, right there on LinkedIn, this is my brother right here, U.S. Integrated Marketing Manager for Reebok. That is my brother right there, Brother Leroy. Morehouse, brother, that is my brother. Look at this. I was on the Black Brain Trust and they were talking about Jordans. I said, wow, they talking about Jordans? I thought the conversation would go a little bit different. I digress. I talk about Jordans too. It sounded like the type of barbershop I would love to be in because they also interweave economics and politics in there. And if you have something that I either disagree with or something that I agree with a lot, I might mention you. So the Black Brain Trust, check them out. They're also a good one. But if they're not looking at black women like Desiree Booker, career strategist for people of color, empowering leaders of color while helping companies attract, develop, and retain diverse talent. Someone who says diverse talent, so she knows that that means she can get women, she can get Mexican, she can get, ethnicity, Hispanic, she can get whatever it might be. But she looks at black folks. That's us. And you don't see Desiree as desirable because of the color of her skin, the way she wears her lady locks. Another Morehouse brother of mine, HR business partner, Asia Pacific for TD Securities. Learned Chinese or Mandarin, came to Morehouse, was kicking ass, and then went to China to do it in business. Oh, no, he wouldn't look at a Kimberly S. Reed. What was his name? Platinum. I'm going to call him Platinum the Clown. Doesn't mess around. Every time I see that guy on another black YouTube channel, I'm going to say Platinum the Clown doesn't mess around. That's my guy now, Platinum the Clown, who doesn't mess around because he looks at Instagram women who look like they were born in the 90s instead of looking at a Kimberly S. Reed. Nigga, ain't you a baby boomer? Fuck you on Instagram for in the first place. I don't care if you were 39 years old. Get your ass off Instagram looking at those women going into public spaces trying to make those Instagram women a standard of beauty when you got a Kimberly S. Reed sitting right here on your LinkedIn. Global diversity, equality, and inclusion executive strategist, award-winning author, top speaker, top rated in corporate leadership, a facilitator and a trainer, going into those white spaces and having the conversation from a lens of what does your inclusion really do? Not even look at Kimberly S. Reed. That's just undesirable. And she posts, you're not stuck. You're just committed to certain patterns of behavior because they helped you in the past. Now, those behaviors have become more harmful than helpful. The reason why you can't move forward is because you keep applying an old formula to the new level in your life. Change the formula, get a different result. But I'm not here to be your dating coach. I'm not even here to talk about what other people got going. I'll drop it in for a minute just to give you that information. This is my guy Darius right here. I met Darius a while ago, and I was determining whether or not I would be a black accountant or what was the other one? It was accounting, it was economics. I think there was one more, but I was on like a tour where I went to a PWI, went to Howard University. That's where I met Darius Kosei at. So out of all the people, I was at a junior college too. And out of all the people that applied, they selected about 10 that were able to go all the way out to Howard University to learn about their accounting program. It was like a week. We got to go to the comptroller, and the government accountability office, some other places where Black people are operating at that high level, in those spaces, the jobs that would be available for national Black accountants, that network that is available. World Economic Forum, Goldman Sachs will no longer do IPOs for companies with all male boards. Somebody just probably thought that I was just rambling, but I'll take you back to the beginning. That has been my time, my 60 minutes here. As you see on the left, you got Young M.A., an artist who made their brand off of lesbianism. Then you got the young homie on the right, who's not a generational Xer. I would call him the impressionable generation, both to which are under attack right now. That young Black man and that young woman who identifies as lesbian. Why are they under attack? Well, that's going to be up to you. But if you ask Brother Moses, it's probably 50% going to be your individual personal decision making. And the other 50% is the external environmental factors. Those are the things that you would look at when you're looking at why inequality persists. I would tell you that it's because implicit bias cultivates those stereotypes, the role of those stereotypes being used for actual discrimination. We did the test. We looked at LinkedIn. We see why it's important. Share this video with a friend. Brother Moses, that's my time. I can drop the link in the chat if somebody wants to come on up and have a conversation about it. That will probably be about 1 minute if there is somebody that wants to join on in and have the conversation. Or maybe I could close this one and have the conversation on a platform where someone is already live. I scrolled through the chat here and I do see that we had quite a few folks that was rocking with us. Got to salute to you and say what's up. Got to keep giving them this information as well. We must continue to give them the actual content that is more or less needed to progress our conversations. Let us progress our conversations. I'm gonna show you this one more time. Let me get it a little bit smaller. Show you this one more time. Your key takeaway. Let me know what that is. Do you think that you have a strong association when it comes with Blacks and weapons? Do you think you have a strong association? Would you readily just, if somebody said guns, do you think white people have more guns? The white household, are they the ones? Who's more dangerous in society? Who's the killer? They'll tell you about the Pookie and the Ray Ray and the Thug. But I'll give you what Harvard and Princeton and Yale are putting out. And forgive me, I said that there were millions, but for this particular test, the distribution summarizes 530,000 scores. Do you believe that 530,000 is a good representative sample? Maybe it's not a representative sample and you just take it for what it's worth. Out of 530,000 scores, people who actually took this test, Brother Moses falls in that 1%. Black Americans, I associate with the harmless objects. Strong automatic association of white Americans with weapons. He said mine was probably moderate, 3%, but that's only if they omit that strong association I have for white Americans with weapons. There's that work. Brother Gab, what's good? I got time today, man. Let's get a conversation going. I'm going to come over there and join yours, or let me see. Cousin George Macon, what up, big bro? People say, well, why do you pro-blacks always call people by like bro or brother or sister or cousin or uncle? That's pop-pop, that's Baba right there. That's dad, that's mom, that's mom. What up, mom? Why do you use those terms, those familiar terms, things that are like family? That's supposed to mean something significant. It is. These terms of endearment that we share is a reflection. My light that sees your light, it wasn't based on your skin tone. I don't have that colorism preference. And in fact, I said I was going to stop right there, but y'all could kiss my ass. Brother Moses is on fire right now. I am hot. Now, there were more people watching at the beginning of this stream, But also remember that you can like and subscribe. You can also share the video. Let's do another one. As you saw, there were a lot of different ones that can be taken. And I think it's important, and I think it's important enough to do more than one. Show this part right here real quick. Important disclaimer. Interpretations that have basis in research done at the University of... If I'm going to do another one, I'm going to have to change that up right there. Let me get that one right there. Where we at? Here? Cut that. Where we at? Oh, that's the one. Yep, that just shows that I just purchased it. All right. What about that one? Give me one quick sec. I'm finna run another one of these bad boys. But again, I'm not information man with the technology yet. I'm still figuring this shit out. Let me see here. I just want to change up the track. Is it this one? Yeah, it's emotion. I appreciate it. We finna rock into the second part of this bad boy. I was going to do this one, the Arab Muslim, because I just don't know. So for me, that's a benefit because I don't know how to associate names that belong with Arab Muslims with those of other religions. So that would be a good one. Presidents. This IAT requires the ability to recognize photos of Donald Trump and one or more previous presidents. Not important to me. Age. Now, I think this is another one. They say when you look at African Americans, these folks are having a hard time determining a 12-year-old from a 16-year-old from a 24-year-old. They just look at blackness and they don't know how old a black person is. When they say in these young, I think that they use it as just an excuse to justify their fear and to say, well, I was afraid. And being afraid is not enough of a reason to take the life of a young black body. So I would look at age as being one that's important to be put out there. I would say when they come, remember the 90s. And in the 90s, after the Rodney King got his ass beat, they were like, well, what do we really want? And so one of the things that they fought for was a sensitivity training or something like that for the police officers and in the police forces. So a part of that sensitivity training has to be evolved to include new information, updated information. And that information would include, in order to become a police officer, there are certain implicit bias tests that need to be done. Do you have a racist undertone or implicit bias? Do you associate weapons with black people more than you would with white people? Do you have a hard time determining age when it comes to your policing? Why? Because they inform you on the decisions. And that wouldn't just be policing. It'll also be in positions of management in major financial institutions, whether it's insurance or investment instruments or, whatever it might be. And then lastly, since we're in that era of Me Too, somebody else could argue for sexuality. Somebody else could also argue for gender. I would not argue that these be the ones that are added to the, that vetting process, but somebody might. Maybe the feminist movement wants sexuality and gender added. Weight is a big one, pun intended. But the one that we are typically waiting for is race. And we're going to beat this one up because we know the symbolism is always going to be there. In the next 5 years, do I think opportunities for black people will get ahead, will improve, remain the same, or get worse? I am an optimist in that light. How much discrimination is there that hurts the chances of black people to get good paying jobs? Oh, that's 100%. The discrimination hasn't left. What do you think the chances are these days that a white person will not get a job or promotion while an equally or less qualified Black person gets one instead. It's still very likely because the hiring and the decision makers at this point in corporate America and in many of those spaces are still white people who have unaddressed implicit biases. That's the reality. You can miss me with every other interpretation. That's not Moses being a racist or whatever. That is the reality by the numbers. Who gets to make that choice? How important is a person's race for getting ahead in life? In America, it's very essential. Your race still matters. Do you think the opportunities for Black people to get ahead have improved in the last 5 years, remained about the same, or gotten worse? That's weird. Some people think certain groups have too much in life politics, while other people feel that certain groups don't have as much influence as they deserve. How much influence do you think Black people have? Way too little. If a person now when you talk power, that's different than influence. Influence, which we do have, is still way too little, because power is the bigger question, and you definitely aren't finding Black people with Black power in Black spaces. Again, 1% feel like Blacks aren't the ones with the weapons or aren't the weapon. Bet you by golly now, if a Black person has the same qualifications as a white person, do you feel that he or she can make as much money? Man, these questions are not rooted in fact. What are you asking me what I feel for? It almost never happens, but the question is, how do I feel, and can they? Are they capable as a person? Yes, they are. Are they? The answer is still no. The answer is no. That's why I say institutions, financial institutions. It's important for the vetting process of those looking to be in management and decision-making positions to do something about their implicit biases. Because the actual reality is that they almost don't. Almost never. They can. It's not almost never either. What the fuck? How do you have almost never? Never is like saying all. Almost always. That's an equivocation. Sometimes it's too broad. Who fucking wrote this shit? How much discrimination is there that makes it hard for Black people to buy or rent housing wherever they want? That is still substantial. You're not talking interest rates to Brother Moses. You are not talking the ability to walk into anywhere and say, I need $250,000. Now do that by the numbers. What percentage of African Americans can walk into a lending institution and say, I need $250,000? Now, can you go get an apartment somewhere is different than can you go and become the apartment owner. Your level of discrimination is always going to be present and prevalent as long as we have unaddressed implicit biases in the minds of the key decision makers who determine whether or not that Black person gets that $250,000 and why. And those are the people who are setting the systems. So miss me with the no, it's a system. The credit is a system. The ability to discern for someone to pay back, or the likelihood of someone to pay back, is a system. The algorithms that are put in are weighted algorithms based off of perceptions. I know how to use Excel. Stupid ass equivocations. Cause I'm a 80s baby. Oh, and they use the same faces here. Well, this is going to be interesting. All right, I'm gonna need something a little harder than that. This test here is going to be triggering. Trigger alert. Put a left finger on the E key for items that belong to the category for European. I can do that because E is the biggest letter and it's first. Put a right finger on the I for items that belong to the category African Americans. Why not an A or even a B? If you make a mistake, you get a red one. You're black. Oh, that's an O, not an I. European. Black. European. Damn it. Yeah, my right side is way better than my left side of this shit. These Europeans. Black. Europeans. Black. Put a left finger on the E key for items that belong to bad. Bad on my left, good on my right. That's good. Oh, terrible, terrific. Something that is pleasing and gross. Something that is dirty or bothersome, glorious and pleasuresome. It's evil, it is a friend and exciting. It is sickening and hate-filled. It's dirty, but there's love and there's pleasure and bothersome. Europeans bad, African Americans good. Good on my right. That word terrific is ugly. Another thing is the order. This is the same for the previous part. Europeans bad, African Americans good. Damn, that's hard when they switch those two up. Dirty motherfuckers. Terrific. Joyful friend. All right, so the left side is black. This part of my brain is just far more functional. So I think what I'm struggling with on this one is just bad and good, and the words that they've chosen. The word terrific is throwing me off every time I see it because I see terrible before I see terrific. So it's a comprehension thing on my part rather than a symbolism thing on the testing part. Appreciate you, Chaos. So bad is supposed to be for African Americans now. Yeah, so on this one, I don't think it's more or less the images that they used or even the words that, for me, it's the words that they have chosen. A few of them throw me off. And I think that's just an interpretation thing on what is either a good or a bad thing. So I think I'm more of the, I don't know, on this one. I don't think this one can have as deep as a reflection on me. Pleasure is that way. It's more or less just remembering now. Yeah, I missed that one 100 times. That one was hard too. Love was easily to be put over there. Terrific is supposed to be a good thing. All right. So again, some of those were a little bit faster than others. It's a very seamless, easy test to administer for yourself. This study, we'll see at the very end of it, includes a lot of good information. It actually tells you how many people have actually taken that test and so forth. And then it tells you what percentages they fell in. It breaks down that information. That's the most important part for me. I already know that I'm pro-Black. I'm not as much as anti-white as I like to put off. I think I do turn that up a little bit when I come into media spaces. It's not anti-white, but I do get more easily triggered when there is a built-in admiration for the whiteness. So I'm doing this because of an internet search on a related topic. To what extent do I enjoy it? Man, it's pretty good. It doesn't change nothing though. Oh, my first one did. To what extent am I skeptical? I'm extremely skeptical. Only because of the numbers of how many Black people actually took it. You're not going to get a higher number of Black people or favorable Black positions if you haven't had Black people who think favorably of Black people participate in your study. The number will be skewed. You just don't got enough people who think favorably. Your test result will only show what the people have actually put in. So if you have a disproportionate number of white people who have found the Harvard Institute this test, and those white people who have found it are the ones who actually think disfavorably about Black people, then of course the numbers are going to look like that. And until you have people who think more favorably of Black people, it doesn't change anything. All right, so let me see. Did they do anything for me? It says I suggested a moderate automatic preference. So I'm in the moderate group for Black people. Half of the people say that they don't have, let me see. Notably, more than 50% of the people included in this chart report having no difference in their attitudes towards two racial categories. So if you ask people, like there was three, this one is the big one. So as you see, let me see if I can make this one bigger so you don't look past this one at all. Let's start with the significant statement. Why is this survey significant? The distribution summarizes 3,314,000. That is your 1% of the American population that have actually taken this test. Now, because it's Harvard, Yale, Princeton, where would you have seen this? This would have most likely been administered by one of those, HR people at some HR conference. It was administered in academia. It was administered in spaces like that. And so you're telling me that 3.3 million of the upper middle class and higher household that have taken this, that's the only thing that you would be able to summate. I think they may be able to break it down and say, by household or whatever. We'll see. I don't think they asked me about my household information. They asked me about my religion. But 1% is the number. That is the population or the survey size. So according to the Harvard Implicit Association test, 50% of respondents reported not having any attitude towards either of the Black or racial categories. They believe that they were neutral. That's how you would source this. That half of the people that responded to the Harvard Implicit Association test, half of them said they didn't have a preference. But after taking the test, the results were otherwise. The results indicated otherwise. Show you what those results indicated. I just got to shrink it a little bit because now they're playing with my screen size. There we go. So as a percentage of the web respondents with each score, I'm gonna leave it on the screen so you can see it. Oh, somebody must have went live, man. Who went live? Somebody drop in the chat and went live. I like to join a conversation more than I like to deliver my own. But at some point, I want to be able to chop this and just provide just the study itself as an opinion piece. We'll get there. We're not there yet. First, we talk about it, then we make it work. So a quarter, again, 25% have a strong automatic preference for European Americans compared to African Americans. 27% are moderate. So remember, mine's is moderate on the other end. So you're already at more than 50% have a strong automatic preference or a moderate preference, and then it's only slightly for about 17%. 51 and 17% gives you about 68%, or 7 out of 10 Americans who responded here have a strong or a slight to a strong automatic preference and implicit bias for Europeans over African Americans. On the reverse end of that, only about 2 to 5% have a moderate automatic preference or a strong automatic preference for African Americans. You are in the minority in every way, shape, and form possible if you are pro-Black. Most people that you talk with will probably have a strong or a moderate automatic preference, even slight, but only 18% of the respondents had no automatic preference. Only 18%. For the most part, in America, you will find people, or just based off of this test, in America, you'll find people that are pro-white, pro-European. And then when you couple that with the weapons, not only are they pro-European, they don't see white folks as the ones with the weapons. They see Black folks as being the ones who with the weapons. That's just where it is. And so as these laws continue to roll out that impact our communities, you'll find gun rights, gun laws, and all of that shit. It's mostly anti-Black. It is still about race. You see the numbers. You don't need me to explain it. Academia. If you asked random Americans what are the top 5 institutions in America, and you don't get any of them to mention Harvard, Yale, or Princeton, they would be fucking lying. I don't even know if Princeton's in America. First of all, fuck Princeton. Never been there. Harvard, never been there. And then Yale, never been there. Wherever they're at, you can ask. Probably you could go in the globe and say, what are the highest colleges? The best colleges, I guess, or the top colleges. And if those ones don't hit that list at some point, man, you got to question the person who's responding. All right, so what else we got? What about order effects? One very, very common question is about the order of the parts of the IAT. The answer is yes. The order in which you take the test can influence your overall results. So in this one, they had Black people with good first. So it was easier for me to finish the rest of the test because I naturally do Black people in good. Therefore, you saw more errors later in my test when they moved the Black and the good traits like friend. I grew up with Black friends. So seeing Black and friend and putting that together for me made that a quicker response key. Love. I grew up witnessing Black love. It was all about Black relationships. It was not about swirling. So love and my ability to associate love and Black people is a quick response key. And it was the first one, so it got my hand accustomed to love and good. Quick. But the effect is very small. So if you first pair African American or Black people with bad and then pair African American or Black people with good, your results might be just a tiny bit more negative toward African American if you would have done it in a reverse pairing. I think that's bullshit. I would disagree. I would say your mind is associating it, but it's also triggering. And that triggering is what is causing an association disorder when you get to the other group. When you get to it in reverse, you're already triggered. So that's creating a different energy. Now you're either trying to defend why you feel a certain way, or you're conscious of it now. I'll say it that way. And because you're conscious of it, it is fucking with your timing. And it's no longer a subconscious thing. You are intentionally trying to do it or intentionally trying to avoid getting it wrong. But the first one has a stronger than the later one, a stronger influence than the later one. The later one is the result of what happened on that first one. So one way we try to minimize that effect is by giving practice trials before the second pairing than we did the first pairing. It's also important to know that each participant is randomly assigned to an order. So that's to defend the overall. Everybody's not getting the same order. So everybody's not going to experience the same triggering like that. And so they're trying to, whatever that is, to defend the test itself. So good that they put that there. There's some additional ones, and then you can take an additional test. I think before I move forward, I actually do want to take this Arab Muslim IAT test. Because I'm a 80s baby. Multiracial. I didn't even notice that the first time through. I guess because my eyes were looking for what it was actually looking for. I think I'm taking either 3 to 5 or 6 more of these things. Protest. Arab Muslims? That's a good one. How warm or cold do you feel towards other people? Extremely cold. What the fuck does other people mean? I don't think I'm gonna be able to do this one. Yeah, I've already gotten the first 2 questions wrong. I'm not able to continue that one because I've already gotten the other wrong. I don't even know what that fucking means. All right, then that's all you get. Yeah, that's all I got. Peace.